All right, my dear friend. Stop whatever you're doing. Seriously. Put the phone down, turn off the noise, and lean in. I'm not saying that for drama's sake. I'm saying it because I've lived long enough to know when a moment is bigger than it looks. And right now, this moment, it's got more weight, more power, more breakthrough wrapped up inside it than the last 10 years of your life combined. You may not see it yet. You might just feel that strange pressure that's been sitting on your chest these past weeks. You've been wondering why certain things have been falling apart, why plans you thought were solid have been crumbling in your hands, why you can't shake the feeling that something's coming. Well, you're not wrong. Something is coming. Life has a way of warning us before it shifts. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it taps us on the shoulder. And then there are nights like this when it grabs you by the collar and says, "Pay attention." That's what this is. You're not standing on the edge of a new season. You're standing at the doorway of a transformation. And it's not the kind you tiptoe into. This is the kind you walk into knowing you'll never be the same. But here's what I know. A door like this doesn't just swing open for anybody. And when it does, you had better be ready to step through. So, before we move forward, I'm going to ask you to do 3 simple things. Not for me, but for the ones out there who need this as much as you do. Hit that like button so this message finds the people it's meant to find. Subscribe so we can carry this to 1 million hearts ready for change. And drop 777 in the comments. That's not just a number, it's a declaration. It says, I'm ready, I'm aligned, I'm stepping into what's mine. Because tonight, we move. My dear friend, you've made it this far in life. So I know you've seen some things. I know you've been tested, stretched, and maybe even broken a few times. But if you and I were sitting across from each other right now, I'd lean in and tell you straight. You're not just another face in the crowd. You've been carrying something, quietly, sometimes painfully, for years. And it wasn't random. You may not have realized it when you were young. But before you even took your first breath, before anybody knew your name, before your mama held you in her arms, you were set apart, marked, not by man, but by purpose. Some folks don't like to hear that because it means their life isn't just a series of lucky breaks or bad turns. It means it's been orchestrated. It means even the mess had meaning. Now, life doesn't always look like that in the beginning. I wish it did. I wish being chosen came with a crown at birth, a parade, maybe a sign in the sky so you knew it from day one. But that's not how it works. In fact, for most of us, the journey to stepping into our calling is disguised as just living. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's lonely, sometimes it's downright unfair. You get rejected by people you thought would always be in your corner. You get betrayed by folks who smiled in your face. You face delays that make you question if the dream was ever real in the first place. But let me tell you something I've learned from both life and the good book. None of that cancels your assignment. Not the rejection, not the betrayal, not the waiting. In fact, those are the very tools God uses to shape you into the kind of person who can carry the weight of what's coming. See, the promise doesn't change. The preparation does. And preparation isn't always comfortable. Think about Moses. People remember the Red Sea, the miracles, the leadership. But before any of that, he spent 40 years in the wilderness. 40. not for 40. That's enough time for your friends to forget your name. Enough time for people to write you off completely. But what looked like exile was actually training. It was where he learned to lead, to listen, to stand when everyone else sat down. The wilderness didn't cancel his calling. It carved it into his bones. Or take David. When we talk about him, we see the giant slayer, the king, the man after God's own heart. But before the throne, there were caves. Before the crown, there were spears thrown at his head. Before the applause, there were nights hiding from a man who wanted him dead. And yet, in those hidden years, he was learning the one thing that would keep him from losing his soul when the palace doors finally opened. How to trust God when no one else could see the promise. And Joseph, my goodness, if anyone had a right to be bitter, it was him. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, wrongly accused and thrown into prison, forgotten by the very people he helped. Most folks would have thrown in the towel right there. But Joseph didn't quit. He stayed faithful in the pit, in the prison, in the waiting. And one day, one single day, Pharaoh called for him, and everything shifted. He went from prisoner to prime minister before the sun went down. That's what preparation looks like. Long seasons of silence, followed by a moment that changes everything. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Those seasons of delay in your life, they weren't punishment. They were strategy. God's strategy. I've lived long enough to know that when things take longer than we expect, it's because something deeper is being built. The bigger the assignment, the stronger the foundation has to be, and the foundation isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the shadows, where nobody's watching, nobody's clapping, and sometimes nobody's even believing in you. You see, I've been there. I know what it's like to feel like you're on the sidelines while everyone else is out there winning. I know what it's like to watch people get opportunities you've prayed for, while you're stuck wondering if your number's ever going to be called. But I also know this. When your time comes, it won't look like anybody else's. And you won't need to force it, because the same God who wrote your name down before you were born, but has been aligning everything to bring you into it at the exact right moment. That's why you can't let the delay fool you. Don't mistake silence for absence. Don't confuse waiting for wasting. Every day you've spent in what felt like a holding pattern, God has been strengthening something in you: faith, resilience, patience, discernment. And when it's time to move, you're going to realize that the very things that felt like they were holding you back were actually the things making you ready. So if you're in that season right now, if you're in your own wilderness, your own cave, your own prison, don't give up. Don't pack it in and call it quits. You are not forgotten, and you are not finished. You are in the middle of God's secret strategy. And when he flips the switch, when he says, now, it won't matter who tried to stop you, who didn't believe, or how long it took. You will be ready, because you've been prepared. That's the truth I've learned, and that's why I'm telling you tonight. You were chosen for this. You've been in training all along. The pain, the delays, the betrayals, they weren't detours. They were the road, and the road has been leading you right here to this moment where the preparation turns into purpose. I know you've carried too much, waited too long, and fought too many battles to skip over the details. I want you to feel this in your bones, because it's the kind of truth that can carry you through the next stretch of the road. Here's the thing about being chosen. It doesn't always feel like a compliment. Sometimes it feels like a burden. You carry the weight of promises no one else can see. You have to make choices other people don't understand. You're asked to keep going when it would be easier to quit. And for a lot of folks over 40, folks like you and me, this isn't just theory. You've lived it. You've had to walk into rooms where you knew you weren't wanted, hold your head up when life tried to bow it down, and keep showing up when nobody was clapping. And here's where faith gets real. There's a difference between being ready for a blessing and being ready to handle it. You see, you can want something with all your heart and still not be ready for it. God knows that. That's why sometimes He lets the dream simmer on the stove a little longer. Not because He's forgotten you, but because He's making sure when you step into it, it doesn't crush you. That's what happened with Moses, David, Joseph. All of them. Their assignments were too big for the untested version of themselves. Moses, the prince, wouldn't have been able to lead people through a wilderness. But Moses, the shepherd, who knew the land, who knew solitude, who knew the sound of God's voice, that Moses could. David, the young harp player, wouldn't have survived the politics of a palace. But David, the fugitive, who learned to rely on God when every door was locked, that David could. Joseph, the dreamer, might have been too quick to speak, too eager to show off his coat. But Joseph, the prisoner, who learned humility, stewardship, and patience, that Joseph was ready for the palace. You see the pattern? The wilderness, the caves, the prison. They weren't punishments. They were classrooms. And some of life's best teachers don't work in air-conditioned rooms with nice desks. They work in hospital waiting rooms, in empty bank accounts, in quiet nights when you can't sleep because you're wondering how much longer you can keep going. And I know that feeling. I've been in seasons where I thought I was moving backwards. I thought the opportunities had passed me by. I thought maybe I'd misheard God entirely. But looking back, I can see it so clearly now. Those were the years He was building the kind of man who could carry the weight of the blessing without letting it crush him. That's what He's doing with you. Here's another truth. When you're chosen, your path is custom built. That means you can't compare your journey to anybody else's. What took someone else 2 years might take you 10, not because you're behind, but because your foundation is deeper. Think about it. If you're building a shed, you don't need much time. But if you're building a skyscraper, you're going to spend a long time digging before anyone sees a thing. And some of you have been in that digging phase for a long time. You've been wondering when the building's going to start going up. Let me tell you, when it does, it's going to rise faster and higher than you ever imagined. That's why I call delay a secret strategy. God hides you in plain sight so no one can sabotage what He's doing before it's ready. He keeps you out of certain rooms, not because you don't belong there, but because the timing isn't right yet. He lets you feel the ache of waiting so that when the door finally swings open, you don't take it for granted. And when that moment comes, it's going to come fast. Joseph didn't get a letter a month in advance saying, "Get ready, Pharaoh's calling." It was one conversation in the morning, and by the evening, he was wearing the ring, riding in the chariot, second in command over all of Egypt. That's how quickly a lifetime of preparation can meet the right opportunity. So, if you're listening to me right now feeling like you've been overlooked, let me tell you, there is no such thing as overlooked when it comes to God's plan. People might overlook you, systems might overlook you, but the one who wrote your story hasn't lost track of a single chapter. you've got to hold on to that. Because if you're over 40, you've already lived enough life to know the truth. There are no wasted seasons. The heartbreaks, the betrayals, the jobs that fell through, the friendships that ended, the nights you cried yourself to sleep, they're all pieces of the same puzzle. And one day, you're going to step back and see how they fit together. When you do, you'll understand what I'm telling you right now. The delay wasn't a detour. It was the road. The waiting wasn't wasted. It was the work. And the work wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And that's why I can say with confidence, you are ready. Maybe not ready for everything all at once, but ready for the next step. Ready to see the first doors open. Ready to walk into spaces you used to just dream about. Because whether you realize it or not, you've been in training this whole time. So, don't despise the season you're in. Don't curse the process. Lean into it. Pay attention to what it's teaching you. Because when the moment comes, and it will, you'll look back and realize you wouldn't change a single thing. Every hard day, every lonely night, every not yet from God, it all made you who you are. And who you are is exactly who you need to be for what's coming. There comes a point in the journey where the years of quiet preparation, the seasons of hidden struggle, and the long stretches of unanswered questions start to converge. It doesn't happen gradually. It's not a slow, polite knock at the door. It's more like a dam breaking. One moment you're wondering if anything will ever shift, and the next, the current is moving so fast you can barely catch your breath. That's what I mean when I talk about supernatural acceleration. It's the moment when all that waiting suddenly makes sense, because you realize the delay wasn't about holding you back. It was about lining everything up so that when it finally came together, nothing and no one could stop it. I've seen it happen in my own life and in the lives of people I admire. You push through year after year, holding on to the promise, keeping the faith, not knowing when it will happen. And then, sometimes in a single day, the tables turn. The same people who doubted you are suddenly asking how they can help. The doors you've been knocking on for years swing wide open, as if they'd been waiting for you all along. It's almost disorienting going from moving inch by inch to watching everything fall into place at once. But that's how God works. He's not bound by our timetables or our logic. When the moment comes, He doesn't just restore what you lost. He redeems the time. And make no mistake, when I say acceleration, I'm not just talking about speed. I'm talking about alignment. It's not about getting somewhere faster. It's about arriving at the exact place you're meant to be, at the exact moment you're meant to be there, with the exact tools and strength you've gathered along the way. It's the kind of timing that can't be orchestrated by human effort. You couldn't force it if you tried. The job that wouldn't call you back suddenly can't stop calling. The relationship that fell apart years ago is replaced by something healthier, stronger, and exactly suited to where you are now. The opportunities you thought had passed you by come back around, only this time you're ready to handle them. I think about all the people I've seen go through this shift. The ones who were laughed at, overlooked, even ridiculed for holding on to their vision. They walked through years of being the underdog, the one no one bet on. But the beauty of acceleration is that it doesn't ask permission. When it's your time, it's your time. The critics can't stop it. The doubters can't delay it. The ones who spoke against you will have no choice but to watch the turnaround. And it's not about proving them wrong. It's about walking in what was always meant for you. One of the things I've noticed is that acceleration has a way of silencing the noise. All those voices that used to tell you you're not enough, that you missed your chance, that you're dreaming too big, they start to fade into the background. Not because they've changed their mind, but because the evidence of your breakthrough speaks louder than their opinions. And you don't even have to say a word. You don't have to defend yourself. The fruit of what's happening in your life becomes the answer to every doubt, every insult, every whispered rumor. But here's something you have to be ready for. When acceleration comes, it often brings with it the fulfillment of dreams you had almost given up on. Some of you know exactly what I mean. You've prayed for things so long that eventually you stopped even talking about them. You stopped imagining them because it hurt too much to hope. You folded those dreams up and put them in a drawer, telling yourself it was time to move on. And yet, in the middle of living your life, here they come, running toward you. I think about that image often. Dreams chasing you. Not you chasing them, not you trying to force them into existence, but them finding you. It's the complete reversal of how the world teaches us to think. We're told to hustle, grind, and claw our way to the top. But when God orchestrates acceleration, He flips that script. The things that were once out of reach start showing up at your doorstep. The doors that were locked tight begin to open with ease. And what once felt impossible starts to feel inevitable. That's the shift I want you to see. This isn't just about having a good year after a rough one, or finally catching a lucky break. This is about divine timing meeting divine preparation. It's about the moment when the process and the promise collide. And when that happens, you're going to find that the very places you were once denied entry are now sending you invitations. You'll stand in rooms you once thought were too far away. You'll see resources come into your hands that you never knew existed. And all of it will happen in such a way that you'll know this isn't coincidence, this isn't luck, this is the hand of God. It's important to prepare yourself mentally and spiritually for that kind of shift. Because acceleration can be overwhelming. We spend so long in the waiting that when things start moving quickly, our first instinct can be to hold back, to question it, to wonder if it's really for us. That's why the waiting was so important. It wasn't just about building patience. It was about building capacity. You've been learning how to carry yourself in a way that won't crumble under the weight of what's coming. You've been learning how to walk with integrity so that when influence and opportunities show up, they don't change who you are. And let's be clear, this isn't about making your life perfect. There will still be challenges, still be obstacles, still be work to do. But the difference is, when acceleration hits, the flow shifts. You go from pushing to being propelled. You go from fighting to gain an inch to covering miles in a single stride. The same God who kept you in the waiting season will be the one who carries you through the season of acceleration. So if you feel that stirring inside you, that quiet sense that something is about to change, don't ignore it. Pay attention. You've been walking a long, slow road, but the pace is about to pick up. And when it does, you won't need to strain to make it happen. You'll just need to be ready to move with it. Because once the doors open, you won't have to knock again. Once the dreams start running toward you, you won't have to chase. And once the voices that mocked you go silent, you'll know. The time you spent in the shadows wasn't wasted. It was the secret preparation for the season when the light would finally find you. This is what supernatural acceleration looks like. It's not random, it's not rushed, and it's never too late. It's the moment when God takes all the threads of your story, the heartbreaks, the delays, the small wins, the hidden battles, and weaves them into something so strong, so undeniable, that you can't help but see his fingerprints all over it. And when that moment comes, you'll understand why it took so long, why it felt so hard, and why deep down, you never gave up. Because in that moment, you won't just be moving faster. You'll be moving in perfect alignment with the reason you were chosen in the first place. I've always loved how the prophet Habakkuk put it. In chapter 2, verse 3, it says, "Though the vision tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay." There's something powerful about that choice of words. Surely come. That's not a maybe. That's not a we'll see. That's certainty. And if you've been alive long enough, if you've weathered a few storms and seen a few seasons, you know there's a different kind of peace that comes when you stop wondering whether the vision will happen and you start trusting that it will happen. The when may be hidden from you, but the fact of it, that's locked in. It's just a matter of time. The thing about God's timing is it rarely matches ours. We want quick fixes, instant turnarounds, blessings that arrive like next-day delivery. But what Habakkuk was pointing to is a deeper truth. There's a process and there's a promise, and you can't skip the process if you want to handle the promise. The delay isn't meant to frustrate you. It's meant to finish you, shape you into someone who can carry what's coming without letting it destroy you. The waiting becomes a safeguard, not a setback. And when that moment finally comes, you'll look back and see the wisdom in the wait. I've seen this truth play out in real life, not just in the pages of Scripture. Take Pope Francis, for example. Here's a man who spent decades in quiet service, far from the spotlight. No cameras, no headlines, no instant recognition. He wasn't chasing position. He was simply faithful in the place God had planted him. And yet one day, the world turned its eyes toward him. Not because he had been campaigning for it, but because he had been preparing for it without even knowing. And when the moment came, he stepped into it with a humility and steadiness that could only come from years of hidden obedience. His influence didn't explode overnight. It was the natural result of a lifetime of integrity meeting the right moment in God's plan. Or look at Tyler Perry. Most folks know him now as the man with the studios, the films, the plays, the empire. But if you rewind the tape, you'll find a man sleeping in his car, scraping together every dime to put on a play that nobody seemed to want to see. Years of disappointment, shows with empty seats, critics who didn't believe in him. But here's the thing, he didn't quit. He kept writing, kept working, kept showing up. And eventually, the vision he carried in his heart met the timing God had in mind. What happened next was more than success. It was acceleration. The years of obscurity were swallowed up in a season of influence so wide-reaching, it's hard to measure. And he'll tell you himself, what he went through was necessary. The lean years taught him how to stand when the blessings came. Stories like that aren't just inspirational, they're instructional. They remind us that acceleration isn't magic, it's alignment. It's when the faithfulness of yesterday meets the opportunity of today, and together they create a future you couldn't have built on your own. The closed doors, the late nights, the lonely roads, they weren't the end of your story. They were the training ground. And the moment that door swings open, all of it starts to make sense. What I've learned is that acceleration doesn't erase the past, it redeems it. Pope Francis's decades of service didn't disappear when he became Pope. They became the foundation of how he led. Tyler Perry's nights in his car didn't vanish when success came. They became part of his testimony, a reminder to himself and others that no season is wasted. The reversal of circumstances isn't about pretending the hard years didn't happen. It's about letting those years inform your character, so that when the breakthrough arrives, you carry it with grace instead of arrogance, with gratitude instead of entitlement. And let's be honest, sometimes the hardest part isn't the waiting. It's believing during the waiting. It's keeping your faith alive when nothing around you seems to be moving. That's why I love that Habakkuk verse so much. It's a promise you can hold on to when your emotions want to let go. Though it tarry, wait for it. That means the vision has its own schedule. It's not running late. It's not lost in the mail. It's moving toward you at the exact pace it needs to arrive at the exact moment it's supposed to. And when it gets here, it will not delay. That truth changes how you carry yourself in the meantime. Instead of forcing doors open, you start preparing for the ones that will open on their own. Instead of wearing yourself out trying to prove you're ready, you invest in becoming ready. Because when that door swings open, and it will, you won't have time to get ready. You'll need to be ready. The pace of acceleration doesn't allow for on-the-job training. The preparation happens now, in the quiet, in the unseen, in the places nobody celebrates. And if you've been walking with God for any length of time, you know He doesn't waste preparation. Think about how He orchestrates things. He'll let you learn skills in one season that you won't use for years, only to have them become essential in the moment your breakthrough arrives. He'll put you in situations that seem completely unrelated to your calling, only to have them become the very experiences that qualify you for it. That's why I tell people, don't despise where you are. You might not see the connection now, but the day will come when you'll look back and realize that every place you've been was preparing you for where you're going. And when the reversal comes, when the years of being passed over suddenly turn into a season where you can't keep up with the opportunities, you'll know it's not an accident. You'll know it's not a fluke. You'll know it's the fulfillment of a promise that was written over your life long before you could see it. And you'll know it came at the exact right time, not a moment too soon or too late. I think that's one of the reasons why these stories stick with us. Whether it's a man in the Vatican who spent years in quiet faithfulness, or a man in Atlanta who wrote plays in the shadows, or your own story that's still unfolding, there's a thread that runs through them all. Faithfulness in the unseen seasons. A refusal to quit when the results didn't match the effort. A belief, however small at times, that the vision was worth waiting for. And then, at the appointed time, acceleration. Acceleration that doesn't just change your circumstances, but your position. That doesn't just move you forward, but lifts you higher. That doesn't just bring the vision to pass, but does it in such a way that everyone who sees it has to admit it couldn't have happened any other way. That's what makes it supernatural. It's not just the speed, it's the precision. It's the way the pieces come together so seamlessly, you know it wasn't your hand arranging them. So if you're listening to this right now and your story still feels stuck, if you've been holding on to a vision that hasn't shown up yet, I want you to let that verse from Habakkuk sink deep into your spirit. Though it tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. it will not delay. That's your anchor. That's your reminder that what you've been building toward is not slipping away from you. It's moving toward you. And when it arrives, you'll be ready, because the same God who gave you the vision has been preparing you for the reality. I know it's not easy to wait. I know the nights can be long and the road can feel endless. But every season has an appointed end, and every vision has an appointed time. Yours is coming. And when it does, it won't just change your situation. It will change the way you see every season that came before it. The wilderness will look like training. The rejection will look like protection. The delay will look like strategy. And you'll carry your breakthrough not with bitterness over how long it took, but with gratitude for everything the wait taught you. That's the power of acceleration and reversal. It's not just about getting to the destination. It's about becoming the kind of person who can thrive once you're there. And when you understand that, the waiting doesn't break you. It builds you. It gets you ready for a pace and a position that would have crushed the unprepared version of you. Pope Francis, Tyler Perry, and countless others who've lived this truth stand as living proof. And one day soon, you will too. Your story will carry the same mark, the unmistakable timing, the undeniable grace, the unshakable truth that the vision was worth the wait. And when people ask you how it happened, you'll be able to look them in the eye and say, "It didn't happen to me. It happened through me. And it came exactly when it was supposed to." Psalm 126:5 wrote, "Those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy." I've always loved that picture, because it tells the truth about life. Our tears are never wasted. Every tear you've cried, every moment you thought you were breaking beyond repair, every night you sat alone wondering how much more you could take, it was all seed. And seed doesn't stay buried forever. It may sit under the ground for a season, but there comes a time when the soil gives way, and what you thought was dead begins to rise. See, we tend to think training happens in classrooms, under bright lights, with someone explaining every step. But in my experience, the real training happens in the shadows, in the quiet, in those moments no one else sees. It's in the hours you've spent on your knees praying when no one was around to applaud you. It's in the decisions you've made to keep showing up, to keep doing right, even when it looked like doing wrong would be easier. That's the foundation for what's coming. Not the big public victories, but the silent, private commitments you made when you could have walked away. When I look back over my own life, I see it clearly. The seasons I thought were breaking me were actually building me. The moments I thought were wasted were actually preparation. Those were the days when God was strengthening my roots, teaching me how to hold steady when the winds got strong. And that's what He's been doing in you. Now, if you've ever watched a goldsmith at work, you know they don't pull pure gold straight out of the ground. What they pull out is a mixture, a lump full of imperfections, impurities, and debris. The only way to get the gold to its true value is to put it through fire, and not just a quick flash of heat either. It has to be refined. It has to sit in the fire long enough for everything that isn't gold to rise to the surface so it can be removed. That's the refining process. Your life has gone through that same fire. Those trials that hurt so bad. The seasons that felt like you couldn't breathe. They weren't just happening to you. They were purifying you. The heat wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to separate you from everything that wasn't truly you. old fears, old doubts, old habits that would have kept you small. The fire has been burning those things away, leaving behind the strength, the wisdom, and the clarity you're going to need for the road ahead. It's hard to see it while you're in it. I know. When you're sitting in the middle of the heat, all you want is for it to be over. But if you've ever come out of one of those fires, you know. You're different afterward. You don't scare as easily. You don't cling to things that aren't for you. You don't waste time on distractions because you've seen how precious time really is. And here's the thing. Sometimes that refining fire doesn't just burn away your personal struggles. Sometimes it shakes up your entire world. It shifts the relationships you thought were forever. It moves you out of places you thought you'd be in for life. It changes your plans, your priorities, your perspective. And while that kind of shaking can feel like loss in the moment, it's often the very thing that repositions you for the next season. I think about Steve Jobs. Now, here's a man who co-founded Apple in his 20s, only to be fired from his own company before he was even 40. That kind of public failure could have ended him. And yet, Jobs later said that being fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to him. It freed him to enter one of the most creative periods of his life, which eventually led him back to Apple, stronger and more visionary than before. That's what a shakeup can do. It can look like destruction from the outside, but on the inside, it's a reset. It's a chance to realign with what really matters and to come back with a deeper sense of purpose. That's what I want you to understand. When God allows a shaking in your life, it's never random. It's not about tearing you down just to leave you in pieces. It's about removing what can't go with you into the next chapter. That might mean certain relationships fade. It might mean certain opportunities close. It might mean you lose the comfort of what's familiar. But every piece that falls away is making space for what's better. And sometimes, that shaking goes even deeper. It doesn't just rearrange your circumstances. It breaks generational chains. It cuts off the patterns and mindsets that have been passed down in your family for decades. Maybe it's a cycle of poverty, where every generation has struggled to get ahead. Maybe it's a cycle of broken relationships, where trust is always shattered and love never lasts. Maybe it's a mindset of limitation, where no one ever dared to dream beyond survival. Those chains are heavy. They're invisible, but they shape how you live, how you think, how you expect life to go. The refining fire breaks those chains. It shows you the lies you've believed about what's possible. It pulls you out of connections that keep you tied to the old way of thinking. And it replaces that old script with a new one. One that says you are not defined by where you came from. One that says your future does not have to look like your past. Some of you have been wondering why certain people have drifted out of your life in this season. Why certain friendships feel different. Why certain family dynamics are changing. And I'm telling you, it's because those connections were tied to an old identity, and God has been moving you into a new one. You can't walk in the fullness of who you're called to be while holding on to every tie from who you used to be. The two can't coexist. That's why this refining process is so personal. It's not just about preparing you for opportunities. It's about preparing you for freedom. Freedom from the limitations you've inherited. Freedom from the voices that told you, people like us, don't do that. Freedom from the weight of trying to carry relationships that aren't meant to go where you're headed. It's about stepping into a future that's not just bigger, but lighter, because you're no longer dragging the past with you. And I know this part is tough. I know it's not easy to lose people or to let go of familiar patterns, even if they were hurting you. But you've got to remember, the refining fire doesn't take anything away that you need. It only removes what will hold you back. And when you come through it, you'll see that the loss was really gain. The shaking was really shifting. And the fire was really forging you into something stronger than you ever thought you could be. And once you've been through that kind of refining, you start to notice something. It's not just your outer life that changes. It's your inner life. The fire has a way of stripping away not just unhealthy connections or habits, but the very foundations you've been standing on. And when those foundations get shaken, it can feel like you're losing your balance. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes God allows a quake not to make you fall, but to reposition your feet on ground that can actually hold your future. See, we all build our lives on something. For some of us, it's been built on the approval of other people, always trying to be who they want us to be, always bending ourselves to fit into a mold that was never meant for us. For others, it's been built on comfort zones, staying where it feels safe, never stepping out because the unknown feels too risky. And for some, it's been built on survival, just getting through the day without daring to dream about tomorrow. Those foundations might hold you for a while, but they can't support the kind of life you've been called to live. So the shaking comes, and it's not gentle. It rattles the walls, it cracks the floors, it forces you to step off what you thought was solid ground. But here's the beautiful part. It's only making room for a better foundation. One built on trust, on truth, on unshakable faith that doesn't depend on the economy, the opinion of your friends, or the conditions of your circumstances. And let me tell you, once you've had your foundation rebuilt like that, you walk differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be loud to be strong. Because you know that even if everything around you starts shaking again, you've been through worse and you're still here. That's the gift of the refining process. It leaves you unshakable. Not because life won't try you again, but because you've already learned where your strength comes from. Sometimes that process feels like a dismantling, especially when it reaches into places that have been untouched for years. Old wounds, old identities, old agreements you made with yourself. Things you thought you'd buried long ago. The refining fire brings those things to the surface, not to shame you, but to heal you. It's like a deep clean. The mess has to come out into the open before it can be cleared away. And while it's humbling to face those parts of yourself, it's also liberating. Because once they're gone for good. That liberation doesn't just stop with you. When the chains break off your life, it sends a ripple through your family, your friendships, even your community. You start to see people around you differently. You become more patient with those who are still in their fire, because you know what it's like to be in the middle of the heat. You become a living example that it's possible to survive what feels unbearable. And without even trying, you give other people permission to believe that they can be free too. Free too. I've seen this happen with generational chains. I've watched people come from long lines of brokenness, cycles of addiction, patterns of financial struggle, a family history of quitting when things get hard. And through their own refining, they break that pattern. And suddenly, the next generation grows up without that same weight on their shoulders. That's the kind of freedom this process brings. It's not just about making your life better. It's about changing the story for those who come after you. And here's where it gets personal. Some of the connections you've lost, some of the people who have walked out of your life, were never meant to go with you into this freedom. You can't drag someone who's committed to living in the old chains into your new life. You can love them, you can pray for them, but you can't slow your steps to match their pace if it means staying in the place you've been called to leave. That's not selfish. That's stewardship. You have to protect what God has placed in you, because not everyone will understand it, and not everyone will value it. The refining fire teaches you to discern the difference between loyalty and bondage. Loyalty stands beside you because it believes in where you're going. Bondage holds on to you because it fears losing control. The fire will make that distinction clear. And when it does, you'll find yourself walking lighter. Not because you've abandoned people, but because you've stopped carrying what was never yours to carry. And let me tell you, that kind of clarity changes everything. It changes the way you pray, the way you dream, the way you plan. You stop asking, how can I keep everyone happy? And you start asking, what's the next step in alignment with my purpose? You stop living from a place of proving yourself, and you start living from a place of knowing yourself. And that's when the pieces of your life start fitting together in ways you never thought possible. It's in that moment, after the fire has done its work, after the shaking has settled, that you realize the refining process wasn't about taking from you. It was about giving to you, giving you strength you didn't know you had, giving you wisdom you couldn't have learned any other way, giving you freedom from weights you thought were just part of life, and maybe most importantly, giving you a deeper relationship with the one who's been with you through every single step of it. You start to see the beauty in the pain, not because you enjoyed it, not because you'd want to go through it again, but because you recognize what it produced in you. You see that every tear watered the soil of your future. Every silent prayer was a brick in the foundation of what's being built now. Every trial was another pass through the fire, bringing you closer to the pure gold you were meant to be all along. And here's the truth. You're not done. The refining process isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong journey. But now you know what it's for. Now you know that every fire you face has the potential to make you better, stronger, freer. And when you know that, you stop fearing the fire. You stop resisting the shaking. You start trusting that whatever is being removed is only making room for what's better. There's a rhythm to God's timing that we often can't see until we're on the other side of it. We spend years working, sowing, enduring, and sometimes it feels like we're pouring out into dry ground. We wonder if the investment is worth it, if the cost is ever going to be met with a return. But then there comes a night, a single night, when everything shifts, and what you thought would take decades to rebuild, God compresses into one divine moment. 10 years of loss, pain, and delay, all reversed in the span of a day. That's not wishful thinking. That's the way He works. When God moves in restoration, it doesn't come in trickles. It comes in waves. He doesn't just replace what was taken. He multiplies it. He redeems time in a way that no man or system can. What you thought was gone forever gets returned in greater measure. And suddenly the weight of all those years doesn't feel so heavy anymore. The memory of the loss fades in the light of the gain. Peter in the scripture, a fisherman by trade, working the Sea of Galilee, doing what he's always done. But this night is different. He's been out there for hours, Casting and hauling, casting and hauling. Empty nets every time. If you've ever put your heart into something and had nothing to show for it, you know exactly what Peter felt. The ache in his arms wasn't just from the work. It was from the disappointment. The quiet frustration of knowing you've done all you can, but the results still aren't there. And then, just when Peter is ready to call it quits, here comes Jesus. He doesn't offer sympathy. He doesn't explain away the lack of fish. He simply tells Peter to go back out and cast the net again, but this time in a different spot. Now, let's be real. That's not what you want to hear after an all-night failure. But Peter decides to do it. Not because it makes sense, but because of who's asking. And in a moment, everything changes. The nets are so full they start to break. He has to call in help to haul it all in. In one catch, God turns a night of loss into a morning of abundance. That's supernatural restoration. It doesn't follow the logic of the world. It doesn't add up on paper. It's the kind of blessing that makes you shake your head and say, only God could have done this. And it's not just about the fish. It's about what the fish represent. It's about showing you that all the empty nights, all the disappointment, all the effort that seemed wasted are nothing compared to what He can release in a single act of favor. Another picture of this kind of restoration is found in the story of the widow in 2 Kings 4. This woman had nothing left. Her husband was gone, her resources were gone, and the creditors were coming to take her sons. That's the kind of pressure that can crush a person, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. And yet, when she goes to the prophet Elisha, he doesn't hand her money. He asks her a question. What do you have in your house? She answers, I have nothing except a little oil. Isn't that how we feel sometimes? Like we have nothing left to give, nothing left of value, except maybe a little something so small it feels insignificant. But here's the truth. In God's hands, a little is never insignificant. Elisha tells her to go borrow as many jars as she can from her neighbors, and then to start pouring that little bit of oil into the empty vessels. And here's where it gets supernatural. Every jar she pours into fills up. The oil doesn't run out until every container is full. She sells the oil, pays her debts, and has enough left over to live on. That's restoration. That's recompense. It's the kind of turnaround that takes you from nothing to more than enough. And again, it's not just about the oil, it's about what the oil represents. That little bit she had left was the seed for her miracle. It was proof that God doesn't need a warehouse to provide for you. He can start with whatever is still in your hand. These stories remind us that supernatural restoration doesn't depend on what you've lost. It depends on what's left. God doesn't have to roll back time or replay the past to restore you. He can take what's still in your life, breathe on it, and multiply it until it meets and exceeds every need you have. That's why you can't despise your little. You don't know what it's capable of becoming when heaven gets involved. But let's be honest, these moments of restoration don't usually come when life feels smooth and easy. They come when you're at the end of yourself, when the nets are empty and the cupboards are bare, when you've run out of ideas and resources. And maybe that's part of the point, because when the miracle comes in that place, you know without a doubt it wasn't your strategy or your skill that made it happen. It was God. And that realization changes you. It humbles you it deepens your gratitude, and it strengthens your faith for the next time you face an empty net or an empty jar. You start to understand that loss isn't the final word. You start to believe that no matter how much time has passed, no matter how deep the loss has been, there is no situation too far gone for restoration. You realize that the same God who filled Peter's nets and the widow's jars can fill the empty places in your life. Whether they're financial, emotional, relational, or spiritual. And here's the thing. When He restores, it's never just about replacing what was lost. It's about setting you up for the future. Peter didn't just walk away with fish that morning. He walked away with a calling. The widow didn't just get her bills paid. She gained the security to live free from fear. God's restoration always positions you for more than you had before. Because He's not just fixing the problem, He's building something new. That's why I say, don't count yourself out just because the last season was hard. Don't assume the empty nets mean it's over. Don't look at the little bit left in your hand and think it's not enough. Because the same God who turned 10 years of loss into one night of abundance for Peter, the same God who turned a drop of oil into a river for the widow, is still working today. And if you're in that place right now, standing on the shore after a long night of nothing, or looking at a jar that's almost empty, He's closer than you think. The moment can come quickly. It can come unexpectedly. But when it comes, you'll know. You'll know because the weight of the years will lift, and you'll feel that unmistakable sense that you've stepped into a new chapter. You'll see the impossible become reality. And you'll look back and realize that the loss didn't break you. It prepared you for a restoration so complete, it almost doesn't make sense. And when that happens, you won't just thank Him for what He gave back. You'll thank Him for how He carried you through the years it was gone, for how He kept you when you thought you couldn't keep going, for how He strengthened you so that when the restoration came, you could handle it. Because that's the kind of God He is. And you know, my dear friend, there's something about God's restoration that always goes beyond the surface. He's not content to simply give you back what you lost. He deals in multiplication. That's the principle we see over and over again in Scripture. I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten, as Joel 2:25 says. Notice that. It's not just about restoring what was stolen in substance, but also in time. He redeems the very years that seemed wasted, the seasons you thought were gone forever. And Isaiah 61:7 takes it even further. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so, you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. That's the double portion principle. When God restores, He doesn't just bring you back to where you were before the loss. He positions you ahead of where you would have been if the loss had never happened at all. Think about that for a second. Restoration that outpaces the timeline, that overtakes the damage, that leaves you better off than if you'd never faced the setback in the first place. That's what makes it supernatural. I've seen this in people's lives in ways that still leave me in awe. I've seen those who lost businesses rebuilt them with strategies they never would have considered before. And the new ventures far outpaced the old. I've seen marriages that went through seasons of deep fracture not only heal, but grow into relationships stronger and more connected than they ever were in the good years. And I've seen people who suffered financial loss be restored in ways that didn't just cover their debts, but positioned them to become the lender instead of the borrower. That's double. That's the kind of restoration that turns a testimony into a tool, because here's the truth. When God gives you a double portion, it's not just for you. Restoration isn't a private gift. It's a kingdom investment. It comes with a purpose bigger than your personal comfort. When Joel talks about restoring the years the locust ate, it's tied to the people being able to bless their land, their community, their future generations. When Isaiah talks about the double portion, it's not just so you can say, "Look what I have now." It's so that the increase in your life becomes an answer for someone else's lack. This is where supernatural restoration shifts into something more strategic. God doesn't just restore your resources. He restores your wisdom, your insight, your ability to think in ways you couldn't when you were in survival mode. When you've been through loss and walked out with a double portion, you carry strategies you didn't have before. You know how to see an opportunity where others only see a problem. You know how to move with discernment because you've already learned the hard way what happens when you move too fast or too blindly. That's why restoration often starts on the inside, before the bank account changes, before the business takes off, before the relationships are healed. He restores your vision. He restores your ability to believe in possibilities again. He restores the hope that loss tried to steal from you. And once that inner restoration takes root, the external follows. Because a double portion isn't just about having twice as much. It's about thinking, leading, and living from a place of abundance instead of fear. I've sat across from people who've gone through hell and come out the other side carrying not just more than they lost, but a blueprint for helping others recover too. That's what happens when restoration is complete. It becomes contagious. You find yourself in rooms you never imagined, speaking into situations you've lived through, offering solutions that no textbook could have taught you. Your pain becomes someone else's map. And that's part of the double portion. Your breakthrough doesn't just lift you, it lifts everyone you touch. It's important to understand that the double portion principle also applies to every dimension of your life. It's not limited to one area. You can experience personal restoration in your heart, relationships, and health, while also seeing double in your finances, your influence, and your opportunities. And sometimes, the double comes in places you weren't even expecting. Maybe you lost in one area, but God restores in another in such abundance that it overshadows the loss. That's why you can never limit the way He chooses to restore. His math doesn't look like ours. And here's something I've noticed about financial restoration in particular. When God moves in that area, it's rarely just about padding your savings account. He restores in ways that reposition you to be a blessing. Suddenly you have the means to fund someone else's vision, to invest in ideas that will change lives, to open doors for people the way no one opened them for you. That's why stewardship is such a big part of this. The double portion comes with a responsibility to manage it well, to keep it flowing, not to hoard it. The same is true for intellectual and strategic restoration. Loss can make you feel like you've fallen behind, like you've missed too much time to ever catch up. But when God restores, He has a way of accelerating your understanding. You start seeing solutions faster, connecting dots others miss, learning in months what should have taken years. That's double. That's Him redeeming the time, even in your thinking. And it's not just for your benefit. It's so you can bring those insights into situations where they can make a difference for others. When you carry that kind of restoration, people notice. They see the fruit of it in your life, but they also feel the weight of your wisdom. They can tell you've been through something, but instead of it breaking you, it built you. Instead of leaving you bitter, it left you better. And whether they realize it or not, they start leaning on the strength you've gained. That's how God turns your personal restoration into a public blessing. And I'll tell you something, once you've experienced that double portion, you become living proof that no loss is final. You become a walking testimony of Isaiah's promise. Shame turned into inheritance, disgrace replaced with joy. The land you thought was barren, producing more than you could have imagined. You start to see every setback differently, because you know that even if you lose something again, the God who restored you once can restore you again. And not just to the old level, but to greater. That's why I believe so strongly that supernatural restoration is as much about perspective as it is about provision. It's about shifting from a mindset of, I need to get back what I lost, to, I'm expecting more than I had before. It's about refusing to measure your future by your past, and instead measuring it by the character of the one who promises double for your trouble. If you're in a season right now where loss has been the headline, I want you to start speaking restoration over yourself. Not just enough to cover the loss, but double. Start imagining what it will look like when God not only makes up for what was taken, but gives you more than you know what to do with. Start asking Him how that double can serve not just you, but the people you're called to impact. Because the sooner you see yourself as a steward of the increase, the sooner you'll be ready to carry it. And don't be surprised if the restoration starts in the smallest, most unexpected ways. Remember the widow's oil? It started with just a little, but the flow didn't stop until there were no more vessels to fill. Sometimes the double portion begins as a small idea, a single open door, a connection you didn't see coming. Don't dismiss it. Nurture it. Pour into it. Because God's multiplication always starts with what's already in your hand. When you live in that expectation, you walk differently. You stop looking at your life through the lens of loss and start seeing it through the promise of restoration. You stop carrying yourself like someone trying to recover and start carrying yourself like someone preparing to receive. And when the double portion comes, and it will, you'll be ready, not just to enjoy it, but to multiply it in the lives of others. That's the beauty of supernatural restoration. It's not just a gift you receive, it's a legacy you pass on. And when you understand that, you realize that every year the locust took, every season the enemy tried to rob, every dream you thought was gone is all coming back to you, pressed down, shaken together, running over, double. And when you walk in that, you can't help but give Him glory, because you know no one else could have done it. Now, I need you to lean in for this part. Don't let your mind drift. Don't scroll past it. This right here is the moment in the message where everything we've talked about, the refining, the restoration, the waiting, the acceleration, it all starts to come together. Because none of that matters if you don't step into who you truly are. If you miss this, you'll have the blessing, but not the boldness to carry it. You'll have the opportunity, but still think like the person who is stuck in the shadows. And I'm telling you right now, this is the part that changes how you walk into every room from here on out. There comes a moment when God says, enough hiding, enough being overlooked, enough being treated like you don't belong at the table. And it's not just about other people's perception, it's about your own. Because if you still see yourself as the forgotten one, the rejected one, the one who's always waiting to be picked, then even when the doors open, You'll step inside like you don't deserve to be there. And I'm here to tell you, you do deserve to be there. Not because of titles, not because of human approval, but because the God who chose you said so. I've met too many people who live their whole lives waiting for someone to recognize them, to give them permission, to tell them it's their turn. They keep asking for a seat at the table, not realizing God's already given them the keys to the whole building. That's the shift we're talking about, moving from seeking approval to walking in authority. From asking, "Sa-san, am I ready?" to declaring, "I am appointed." This is what it looks like to leave the role of the forgotten and step into the place of honor. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. You're not forcing your way in. You're finally occupying the space that was yours from the beginning. Think about David. For years, he was out in the fields, tending sheep while his brothers stood in front of Samuel. His own father didn't think to call him in. But when the time came, the oil wouldn't flow for anyone else. That's what it means to be chosen. You can be overlooked by everyone in the room, but heaven will still reserve the seat for you. And when that moment comes, you have to walk into it without shrinking back. Too many people get the opportunity, but still carry the posture of someone asking for permission. They tiptoe around, waiting for a nod of approval from the same voices that once ignored them. That's not what God's looking for. He's looking for people who will step into their calling like it's already theirs, because it is. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people delay their own destiny by waiting for consensus. They want everyone to agree, everyone to be on board, everyone to validate the vision. But the truth is, if your calling really comes from God, not everyone is going to understand it. Not everyone will support it. And if you wait for that, you'll be waiting forever. You have to learn to act on the confirmation He gives you, not the applause people give you. This is where the shift in identity gets real. You stop introducing yourself by what you've been through, and you start introducing yourself by where you're going. You stop explaining your worth in terms of what you can do for others, and you start standing in your worth simply because of who you are in Him. You stop hesitating in rooms you were born to lead, and you start speaking with the kind of authority that comes from knowing you didn't put yourself there. He did. And I know that's easier said than done. When you've been conditioned to be the one who's passed over, you don't just flip a switch and feel like royalty overnight. But here's the truth. You don't wait to feel it before you live it. You live it until you feel it. You speak it until it becomes your natural voice. You carry yourself like someone who belongs, even when the old insecurities try to whisper otherwise. That's how identity shifts. It's not just revelation, it's repetition. For some of you, this is going to mean physically leaving spaces that no longer fit you. Not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you've outgrown the role they want to keep you in. You can't stay in the corner when God's called you to the center. You can't keep wearing the coat of the forgotten when He's already placed a mantle of leadership on your shoulders. At some point, you have to take off the old garment, fold it up, and step into the new one. And let me tell you, stepping into authority will always feel a little uncomfortable at first. You'll have moments where you second-guess yourself. You'll hear the old voices saying, "Who do you think you are?" And that's when you have to answer back, "I'm the one God called for this moment." Not the one who got here by luck. Not the one who slipped in unnoticed. The one who was appointed before the foundations of the world for this assignment, in this season, with these gifts. When you embrace that, something shifts in the atmosphere around you. People respond differently. Opportunities come to you instead of you chasing them. Not because you're suddenly more talented, but because authority is attractive. It carries a weight that can't be manufactured. It comes from knowing where your power comes from, and it's not from man. It's from the one who sent you. And here's the beauty of it. When you step into that place, you're not just changing your own story. You're opening doors for others. Your boldness gives permission to the ones watching you, the ones who've been hiding in their own shadows, to step out too. You become a living example that you don't need the whole world to sign off on your calling before you start walking in it. So if you hear nothing else I'm saying right now, hear this. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for everyone to agree it's your time. Stop waiting for the ones who overlooked you to suddenly recognize your value. They might never do it, and that's fine, because you're not here to answer to them. You're here to answer to the one who called you. This is the turning point. This is where you lay down the name you've been answering to. Forgotten, rejected, overlooked, and you pick up the name he's been calling you all along. Chosen, appointed, equipped. And from this point on, you stop moving like someone who's trying to earn a place, and you start moving like someone who's already been placed. Because the truth is, you have been. And the sooner you walk like it, the sooner the world will see it too. When I talk about stepping into your authority, I'm not talking about ego. I'm not talking about walking into a room trying to prove how important you are. I'm talking about moving from survival to dominion. That's a shift so deep, it changes everything. Your posture, your decisions, your voice. Think about Esther, a woman who didn't start in a position of influence. She wasn't born into a throne. She was born into obscurity. She was an orphan, raised by her cousin, living under the shadow of a foreign empire. Nothing about her circumstances screamed future queen. But God was writing a different script. And part of that script was preparation. A preparation so quiet, so subtle, that it didn't even look like preparation. Esther spent months in the palace before she ever saw the king, going through rituals and routines that to an outsider might have seemed like vanity. Perfumes, oils, garments. But what looked like beauty treatments was actually positioning. God was using the customs of that palace to prepare her for a moment when beauty would be the least of what she needed. Because when her people's survival was threatened, it wasn't her looks that saved them. It was her courage, her wisdom, and her authority. The turning point for Esther came when she realized she could no longer be silent. Her cousin Mordecai told her plainly, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" And in that moment, she shifted from being a woman in survival mode, doing what she had to do to get by, to a queen in dominion, using her voice to change the destiny of an entire nation. She walked into the king's court uninvited, knowing it could cost her life, but also knowing her assignment was bigger than her safety. That's authority. That's identity fully embraced. Then there's Paul and Silas, locked in a prison cell at midnight, their bodies beaten, their feet in stocks. Most people would have been sitting in the dark, nursing their wounds, wondering why God had abandoned them. But Paul and Silas weren't operating from a victim identity. They knew who they were and who they belonged to. So instead of complaining, they started praying and singing hymns. They praised like free men in the middle of a prison. And then came the earthquake. The foundations of the prison shook, the doors flew open, and the chains fell off. Not just theirs, but every prisoner's. That's the power of walking in authority even in captivity. You don't just get free, you set the people around you free. Paul and Silas didn't survive that night. They dominated it. They turned a cell into a sanctuary, and the result was freedom. These two stories show us something critical. Stepping into your authority isn't about waiting until you're in perfect circumstances. Esther had to speak up before she knew how it would turn out. Paul and Silas had to sing before they saw the chains fall. Dominion starts inside you before it shows up around you. And that's where this shift gets real, moving from survival to dominion. See, survival is reactive. It's about doing whatever you can to make it through the day. It's about conserving energy, protecting yourself, holding back because you don't know what's coming next. Dominion, on the other hand, is proactive. It's about making moves that shape the day instead of just enduring it. It's about using your voice, your gifts, your position to influence the environment instead of letting the environment dictate your every step. When you're in survival mode, you're constantly waiting for the next hit, the next loss, the next disappointment. You live cautious, guarded, small. Dominion breaks that. Dominion says, I'm not just going to make it through, I'm going to build. I'm going to advance. I'm going to take territory that fear tried to keep from me. But here's the thing. You can't walk in dominion until you know who you are. If Esther had still seen herself as an orphan girl unworthy of the throne, she never would have risked approaching the king. If Paul and Silas had still seen themselves as helpless prisoners, they would have stayed quiet in that cell. Your actions will always match your identity. Change how you see yourself, and you'll change how you move. That's why the enemy spends so much time attacking your identity. If he can keep you believing you're still the rejected one, still the forgotten one, still the one barely hanging on, he doesn't have to stop your authority, because you'll never use it. But the moment you recognize, I am chosen, I am appointed, I have been given authority, everything shifts. You stop asking for permission to exist, and you start exercising the power you already have. Dominion also means you stop living for survival-based decisions. In survival, you take whatever you can get. In dominion, you decide what's worth your time, your energy, your presence. You don't just accept opportunities. You weigh them against your assignment. You understand that just because a door is open doesn't mean it's your door. That's a shift from desperation to discernment. It also means you stop living like everything is scarce. In survival, you're always afraid the little you have will run out. In dominion, you live with the confidence that resources flow to where God sends you. You move like someone who knows that if the oil ran for the widow, if the nets filled for Peter, then provision will meet you in your assignment. That confidence changes how you talk, how you plan, how you lead. Now, I'm not saying the shift happens overnight. Esther had months of preparation. Paul and Silas had years of walking with God before that prison night. This isn't about flipping a switch. It's about building a mindset. Every decision you make from a place of authority instead of fear strengthens the new identity. Every time you choose to speak instead of staying silent, to act instead of waiting for approval, you're reinforcing the truth of who you are. And here's the beauty. You don't have to wait for a palace or a prison break to start. You can step into dominion right where you are. You can start by owning your voice in the meetings you've been quiet in, by making decisions for your family that align with the future you see, not just the pressure you feel, by refusing to shrink yourself to fit into the expectations of people who only knew you in your survival season. Dominion is not about arrogance. It's about responsibility. It's about realizing that what you carry isn't just for you. Esther's crown wasn't for her comfort, it was for her people. Paul and Silas's freedom wasn't just for their benefit, it was for every prisoner in earshot. When you walk in authority, your decisions, your courage, your obedience, they ripple out into lives you may never fully see. So ask yourself, where in my life have I been living like Esther before the throne room moment? Where have I been singing the songs of survival instead of the songs of freedom like Paul and Silas? And then decide, today is the day I step into dominion. Because the truth, Yarinizan, you've already survived enough to prove you're capable. You've already been refined, restored, and prepared for more than just getting by. This next season is about ruling in the space God's given you, not as a dictator, but as a steward. Not to control, but to cultivate. Not to dominate people, but to dominate fear, doubt, and limitation. You are not who you were in the wilderness. You are not who you were in the prison. You are not who you were before the crown. You are who God says you are. And when you walk like that, you're not just surviving anymore. You're shaping the future. And that, right there, is what it means to move from survival to dominion. There's a moment in every God-given journey when the hidden work becomes visible, when the years of refining, the long nights of praying, the seasons of silence, all start to break into the open. And when that happens, it's not just about you anymore. This is where some people misunderstand promotion. They think it's the end goal, the final reward for surviving the storms. But promotion in the kingdom isn't just personal. It's generational. It's communal. God doesn't elevate you simply so you can have a bigger platform, a better life, or a louder voice. He raises you up because what He's placed in you carries the power to shift the destiny of entire bloodlines and communities. See, when you rise, you carry more than your own name with you. You carry the prayers of those who came before you, the hopes of those around you, and the possibilities for those who will come after you. Your emergence becomes a key that unlocks doors for others who didn't even know those doors existed. That's why your promotion is never just about your personal comfort. It's about your assignment. It's about the way God wants to ripple His influence through your life into every space you touch. You can see this truth in the life of Nelson Mandela. This was a man who spent 27 years in prison, 27 years of being hidden, silenced, restricted. Most people would have come out bitter, broken, or small. But Mandela emerged not just for his own sake, but for the liberation of an entire nation. When he walked free, it wasn't just one man's chains falling. It was the beginning of the dismantling of apartheid. His rise didn't just restore his own life. It altered the course of history for millions. That's generational impact. That's what happens when the refining process produces a leader who knows their life is tied to the freedom of others. Joyce Meyer's story carries that same DNA. She came from a background of abuse, rejection, and deep personal pain. She could have spent her life quietly surviving, keeping her story hidden. But instead, she allowed God to use the very places of her wounding as the foundation for a ministry that's touched millions of lives. Her public emergence wasn't just about building a teaching platform. It was about giving voice to those who'd been silenced by shame, about breaking the stigma around healing and restoration. Today, people all over the world are walking in freedom because she chose to rise publicly and use her influence for the sake of others. And then there's Harriet Tubman. She could have escaped slavery and lived out her days in safety, never risking her life again. But Harriet understood something. Her freedom meant nothing if her people were still in chains. So she went back, again and again, leading hundreds to safety on the Underground Railroad. Her emergence wasn't glamorous. It was dangerous. But it was powerful. And it sent shockwaves through both the physical world and the spiritual one. She became not only a liberator in her own time, but a symbol for generations to come of what it means to walk in your calling, no matter the cost. These examples remind us that public emergence always carries responsibility. When God raises you up, He's entrusting you with influence that's meant to serve. And when you understand that, you stop seeing promotion as a personal prize and start seeing it as a strategic position. You begin to realize, I'm here because somebody else's future is tied to my obedience. For many of you, that's exactly what's about to happen. You're going to become the breaker in your family line, the one who ends the cycles that have held your people back for generations. Maybe it's a cycle of poverty, where no one's ever been able to rise above survival. Maybe it's a cycle of broken relationships, where trust is always betrayed and love never lasts. Maybe it's a cycle of small thinking, where dreams are dismissed as impossible before they even begin. Whatever it is, God has positioned you to break it. And breaking it doesn't just free you, it frees those who will follow. Being a curse breaker means you stand in the place where the chain has been strongest and you refuse to let it go any further. It means you become the point where the story changes. And make no mistake, when you step into that role, it will shake things. Not just spiritually, but practically. You'll see opportunities open that no one in your family's history has seen before. You'll make decisions that create new patterns for your children, your nieces and nephews, your community. You'll become living proof that the old way isn't the only way. But here's what you need to know. Your emergence will not be quiet. Spiritually, it will send a signal that the stronghold has been broken. The enemy doesn't like that, which means you might feel resistance. But you need to remember, resistance is confirmation. It's proof you're touching something that matters. Every step you take into public authority shakes the ground beneath the structures that have kept people bound. And in the natural, people will notice too. Some will celebrate, others will question. But either way, your presence will demand attention. This is why your identity had to be settled in the hidden years. If you rise without knowing who you are, the pressure of public influence will crush you. But when you've been refined, restored, and anchored in your calling, you can stand steady no matter what comes. You're not swayed by praise or criticism because you know why you're here. You're not tempted to shrink back because you understand this isn't about ego. It's about assignment. And as you step into that space, you'll find that your very existence begins to challenge the norms around you. People will see your life and realize they've been living smaller than they need to. They'll watch you walk through doors they thought were closed forever and start asking what's possible for them. That's how generational impact works. It's not always about preaching or teaching. Sometimes it's simply about living in a way that makes other people believe more is possible. The ripple effects of your rise will touch places you may never see. A young person in your community might take a different path, because they saw you break out of a cycle they thought was unbreakable. A family member might decide to go back to school, start a business, or heal a relationship because your life made them believe change is real. And beyond that, your influence can open resources, create jobs, fund opportunities that will outlast you. That's the power of public emergence. It becomes a seedbed for the next generation. But don't miss this. Public emergence is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new chapter. When you step into this level of influence, the work doesn't get easier. It gets bigger. And that's a good thing, because God never promotes you to a place where you can lean back and coast. He promotes you to a place where you can build, where you can fight for others, where you can multiply the impact He's been growing in you all these years. So, if you feel that pull right now, if you sense that God is shifting you from hiddenness into visibility, don't shy away. This isn't about spotlight. It's about stewardship. This isn't about you being known. It's about Him being known through you. And when you rise with that in mind, you become unstoppable. Your emergence will shake both the spiritual and natural realms because it's not built on ambition. It's built on assignment. And assignments like this don't just change lives, they change legacies. You are stepping into something that will echo through generations. You are becoming the kind of ancestor your descendants will thank God for. You are stepping into the role of liberator, builder, restorer, innovator. Someone whose name may be remembered, but whose impact will live on in the lives of those you touch. And when that moment comes, when your name starts being mentioned in rooms you've never entered, when your influence starts reaching places you never imagined, remember why you're there. Remember the long nights, the refining seasons, the prayers you prayed when no one was listening. Remember the people still in the fight who need you to keep going. And most of all, remember that the God who brought you to this moment will keep you in it. Because your emergence isn't just about you. It's about His glory, your people's freedom, and the future He's building through your life. One day, without warning, you realize the ground beneath your feet feels different. Lighter, steadier, safe. The tension in your shoulders starts to ease. The heaviness that's been pressing on your chest begins to lift. You can't quite explain it, but deep down you know. You've crossed a line. You're no longer in the battle. You're standing on the other side of it. And this isn't just a temporary pause, some quiet moment before the next storm. No, this is the completion of a season. The war you've been fighting for years, whether in your body, your mind, your relationships, your finances, or your spirit, that war is over. I need you to hear me. Over doesn't mean paused. Over means the campaign has ended. The assignment of the enemy in that area of your life is finished. The ground you've been defending is secure now. The territory you've been fighting to take is yours. There's a holy finality to this moment, and you need to embrace it. Too many of us live like the fight is still raging long after the victory has been won. We keep our fists up, bracing for another blow, when God is saying, "Put your weapons down. You're in a new chapter now." It's the same truth Joseph lived in Genesis 50:20. He told his brothers, the very ones who sold him into slavery, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." That's the perspective you gain when the battle is truly over. You stop seeing only the pain of what happened, and you start seeing the purpose in it. You recognize that while the enemy was plotting your destruction, God was weaving your deliverance. Think about Joseph's life. From the outside, it looked like setback after setback. Betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, left to rot in prison. But when the season turned, it turned completely. He didn't just get released from prison. He was elevated to the second most powerful position in Egypt. He didn't just survive the betrayal. He became the source of survival for the very ones who betrayed him. That's what God does at the end of a battle season. He takes what the enemy meant for evil and flips it so hard in your favor that it not only blesses you, but blesses others through you. And when you step out of a season like that, you don't step out empty-handed. You step out carrying the kind of wisdom, resilience, and authority that only a battle can produce. You come out like the 3 Hebrew boys in the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who walked through the furnace bound, but came out free. Scripture says they didn't even smell like smoke. That's what it means to leave the fire without being burned. The trial didn't destroy you, it refined you. You may have walked into the battle with fear, but you're walking out with faith. You may have walked in with questions, but you're walking out with answers you'll carry for the rest of your life. And here's the beauty. You're not coming out of this stripped of your dignity. You're coming out with your head high, your integrity intact, your character stronger than before. Too many people leave battles bitter, cynical, suspicious of everyone. But when God brings you out, He doesn't just rescue you physically. He restores you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. You can smile without pretending. You can trust without trembling. You can move forward without constantly glancing over your shoulder. This is the moment Paul was describing in 2 Timothy 4:7-8 when he said, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day." There's a completion in those words. Paul wasn't speaking as someone still swinging in the ring. He was speaking as a man who had gone the distance and crossed the finish line. And what was waiting for him on the other side wasn't just relief. It was reward. That crown of righteousness isn't just a heavenly promise. It's a present reality for those who finish their battles well. It's the honor, the vindication, the divine affirmation that says, you didn't quit, you didn't compromise, you stood your ground, and now, here is your reward. For some of you, that reward will be a tangible breakthrough. Relationships restored, health renewed, resources released. For others, it will be an internal shift so deep that no amount of external opposition can ever shake you again. Either way, the crown is proof that the season has turned. Now, I want to be clear. Coming to the end of a battle season doesn't mean you'll never face another challenge. Life will always have its share of tests. But there's a difference between facing a new challenge and living under the shadow of an old war. What's over is over. That specific fight, that particular stronghold, that recurring attack, it's done. And the strength you gained in that season will carry you into the next one, equipped in ways you couldn't have been otherwise. I think about the Israelites crossing the Red Sea. For generations, they'd lived under the oppressive hand of Pharaoh. Every day was a battle for survival. But the moment they stepped onto the far shore and watched the waters close over the Egyptian army, something shifted. That enemy would never chase them again. They might face hunger, thirst, and wilderness ahead. But that chapter of slavery and pursuit was over forever. That's the kind of closure God is speaking over you now. And here's the thing. You have to let yourself believe it. Sometimes we get so used to fighting that peace feels foreign. We keep scanning the horizon for threats instead of settling into the safety God has provided. But this is your time to breathe. This is your time to rebuild without fear that the enemy will knock it down again tomorrow. This is your time to plant seeds, knowing they'll have a chance to grow in peace. Some of you need to mark this moment, literally. Write it down, put a date on it, speak it out loud. Declare, this battle is over. Not I hope it's over, not maybe it's over, but it is finished. Because your words shape your reality, and your faith is the lock that seals this new chapter. When you live with that conviction, you stop reacting like someone still under attack. You stop making fear-based decisions. You stop holding back from opportunities because you're afraid of another loss. You start living like someone who knows the ground under their feet is secure. And that posture, that confidence, becomes a shield in itself. This is also the time to take inventory, not of what you lost, but of what you gained. You may have come through with some scars, but those scars are proof you survived. You may have lost some things you thought you couldn't live without, but look at you now. You're still standing, stronger, wiser, more discerning, more compassionate. Those are treasures the battle couldn't take from you, and they're worth more than gold. And as you step into this new season, remember that your victory isn't just for you. Other people need to hear your story. They need to see that it's possible to come through the fire without being burned, to walk out of the prison without losing your dignity, to finish the race with your faith intact. Your testimony becomes their roadmap. Your survival becomes their inspiration. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about escaping the battle. It's about emerging from it crowned. Crowned with righteousness, crowned with purpose, crowned with a deeper intimacy with the one who walked with you through every moment of it. And when you wear that crown, you carry yourself differently. You don't stoop under the weight of fear or shame anymore. You stand tall, not because you're pretending to be strong, but because you are strong. Strong in the Lord, strong in the lessons you've learned, strong in the unshakable truth that if God could bring you through that, He can bring you through anything. So lift your head, breathe deep, let the sound of the battle fade behind you, and step into this new season like someone who knows they've already won. Because you have. And nothing, not the memory of the fight, not the scars, not the whispers of the enemy, can take that victory from you. You've fought the good fight. You've finished the race. You've kept the faith. And now, it's time to wear the crown. My friend, you've heard the words. You've felt them land. I want you to pause right here. Take a breath. Feel the weight of this moment. I'm not speaking about tonight, like it's just another date on the calendar. I'm talking about this night, this point in time, as a divine appointment in your personal history. One day, you'll look back on it and realize everything shifted here. Not next week, not next year. Now, this is the hinge on which your next chapter swings. Everything you've endured, every lesson you've carried, every refining fire you've walked through. It's all been leading to this point. And the truth is, moments like this don't come every day. They are rare, they are holy, they demand a response. So I'm telling you, step into it boldly. No hesitation. No looking over your shoulder wondering if the old season is still chasing you. The battle is behind you. The door in front of you is open. And the one who opened it is saying, "Son, come in." Not cautiously, not apologetically. Come in like you belong here, because you do. Don't let fear rob you of this moment. Fear will whisper, "You're not ready yet. You need more preparation. You should wait for a safer time." But you know deep down, that's not the truth. You've been prepared in ways you don't even fully see yet. And waiting any longer won't make you more ready. It will only delay what's already yours. I have to remind you of this. Your promotion, your rise, your emergence, it's not for show. It's not so you can stand taller than the rest and say, "Look at me." It's so you can stand taller and say, "Look at him." Everything God has given you, every bit of authority, influence, opportunity, is a tool for service. It's a mantle for impact. This is the kingdom way. You rise to lift others. You gain influence to open doors for those who've been shut out. You gain resources to meet needs others can't meet on their own. You carry the platform not to keep the spotlight on you, but to direct it toward the one who gave it. If you remember that, you'll never lose your footing no matter how high he takes you. And when you step into this moment with that heart, you become dangerous to the darkness. You become the kind of person hell takes notice of. Not because you shout the loudest, but because your obedience moves like a sword through the enemy's plans. You walk into rooms and things shift. You speak and chains break. You act, and the ripple effects touch generations. So here's what I want to leave you with before we pray. Tonight is not a rehearsal. This is it. Step into your assignment fully. Speak with the voice he's given you. Move with the authority he's placed on you. Serve with the heart he's formed in you. And don't you dare apologize for the space you take up, because that space was always meant for you. Now let's pray. Father God, tonight we stand at the threshold of the new. We thank you for every season that brought us here, the battles that built us, the losses that refined us, the victories that proved your faithfulness. Tonight, we step forward boldly into what you've prepared. We lay down fear, pride, and hesitation. We receive every gift, every mantle, every assignment you're placing in our hands. Use us not for our own glory, but for your kingdom, for the good of others, and for the generations to come. Seal this moment in heaven and earth, and let us never turn back. In Jesus' name, amen. Before we close, I want to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me through this message. I know your time is valuable, and the fact that you've given these moments to listen, to reflect, and to open your heart means more than I can say. My hope is that something in these words has lit a fire inside you, stirred your spirit, and reminded you that your story isn't over. It's just turning the page. If this message has spoken to you, I want to invite you to help it reach others who need it just as much. Hit the like button, not for me, but so the algorithms put this in front of someone who's desperate for hope right now. Subscribe so you don't miss the next word of encouragement, the next push forward. And leave a comment, maybe 777 to declare alignment and completion, or maybe a word of your own testimony, because you never know who might be reading and find strength in your courage to share. As we go our separate ways tonight, I want to speak a blessing over you. May you walk boldly into the change that begins right now. May you move with the quiet confidence of someone who knows God's hand is on their life. May you step into rooms with courage, speak with clarity, and act with conviction. And as you go, may you find His presence in every turn, His peace in every decision, and His provision in every step. The shift begins tonight. You're not walking into it alone. He goes with you, ahead of you, and within you. This is your time. This is your season. And starting now, your life will never be the same.